Welcome! Today's story is going to be long, so buckle up. Don't forget to subscribe. The heavy, sterile scent of hospital disinfectant filled the air, but Jin wasn't in a hospital. He was standing on a perfectly manicured lawn outside a luxury glass high-rise. Above him, the sky looked just a bit too blue, the clouds a little too crisp like they had been rendered with a digital brush. He had been here for 3 days, and he already hated it. Jin was a transmigrator, sucked violently out of his comfortable reality and shoved into the shell of Jin Avery, the designated loser of the radiant path of love. It was a romance webcomic that had been abruptly abandoned by its author. For 2 years, the world had been frozen in a state of narrative limbo, waiting. Now that Jin was here, the world will had finally woken up, desperate to force the story to its pre-scripted conclusion. The problem? Jin Avery's entire purpose in the script was to be an unrequited, self-sacrificing simp for the female lead, Clara. According to the rules burned into Jin's mind by the system, his narrative duties were simple. 1. Provide endless financial and emotional resources to Clara. 2. Throw his body into harm's way to protect her, proving his tragic devotion. 3. Act as a pathetic stepping stone to make the arrogant male lead, Drake, jealous. If he refused, the world would forcefully stabilize the narrative timeline, and the penalty for non-compliance was brutal. On his second day, Jin had decided he wasn't going to play along. Clara had texted him, demanding he drive across the city in a torrential downpour to deliver her favorite iced matcha latte. A classic Chapter 12 trope meant to show his pathetic dedication. Instead, Jin threw his phone on the bed, ordered a pizza, and turned on the TV. He wasn't going to be anyone's errand boy. He didn't even make it to the first slice. The moment the clock struck the deadline for the delivery, Jin's heart seized. A suffocating, crushing pressure descended on his chest, pinning him to the floor. It felt as though his very life force was being siphoned out through a straw. The edges of his vision blurred into pixelated black static, and an agonizing, burning pain crawled through his veins, like boiling oil replacing his blood. Warning! Narrative deviation detected. Characters must adhere to core archetypes. System restabilizing user life force to compel compliance. Jin gasped for air, his fingers clawing at the carpet. The world didn't care about his free will. To this world, he wasn't a human being. He was a plot device. If he didn't act like a simp, the universe would literally drain him until he was a corpse just to keep the story neat. The pain only stopped when he weakly dragged himself to his feet, grabbed his keys, and drove through the storm to deliver the melting latte. When he handed it to Clara, she didn't even look at him. She just took it, complained that it was watery, and shut the door in his face. Sitting in his car, shivering from the rain, Jin stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes from the life force drain. He couldn't just rebel. The system was a literal-minded machine. It operated entirely on visual tropes, explicit dialogue cues, and surface-level data. It couldn't read his mind, and it didn't understand genuine human emotion. It only checked boxes. Did he praise her? Yes. Did he document her life? Yes. Did he give her attention? Yes. A cold, sharp smile slowly spread across Jin's face as the pieces of a beautifully malicious puzzle fell into place. If the world required him to be Clara's ultimate, most devoted follower on a global stage, then he would give it exactly what it wanted. He would give her so much devotion that it would choke her. He pulled out his phone, opened a brand new social media app, and began typing out a handle. He was going to comply with the rules. He was going to simp. But by the time he was done, Clara and her arrogant male lead would be begging the author to delete the comic entirely. It was time to introduce this dead webcomic to the terrifying, unstoppable monster known as the viral internet algorithm. He forced the system into a contract, using its own rigid programming against it. If I am going to be the ultimate simp, my love needs a global stage. If you want maximum devotion, give me the algorithm. Better yet, if I'm supposed to document her perfection, I need the best tools. Provide me with high-definition tracking data and visual captures of my goddess so I never miss a moment of her glory. The system, operating on pure literal logic, accepted the terms. Excellent devotion detected, request approved, cognitive buffer applied, algorithmic favoritism, user's content will receive absolute optimization, system auxiliary activated, automatic satellite capture and rendering engaged to assist user in adoring the female lead. With a cold smile, Jin created a brand new social media handle, @ClarasLoyalSimp. To the system, this account was the ultimate digital monument of devotion. To Jin, it was a weapon of mass social destruction, and the system was going to do all the heavy lifting for him. He wouldn't even have to leave his couch to simp. The true test of the strategy came just 2 days later. According to the original webcomic script, Clara was supposed to subtly distance herself from Jin before officially breaking up with him, all while secretively meeting the toxic male lead, Drake, at a luxury boutique hotel. It was a trope designed to make Jin look like a clueless, pitiful loser, while building the forbidden romance tension between the leads. Rendering visual update for the devoted user. A holographic screen pinged into existence in front of him. Because the system wielded the literal power of a reality-warping webcomic, it bypassed the hotel's thick concrete walls and privacy curtains entirely. It provided Jin with a series of pristine, studio-quality, high-definition captures of Drake pulling up in his sports car and ushering Clara straight into room 402 of the Grand Mirage Hotel. Jin didn't have to lift a finger or break a sweat. He just saved the system-generated images, opened the app, and uploaded them with a caption dripping in toxic, unadulterated positivity. @ClarasLoyalSimp. Our beautiful goddess Clara looks absolutely ethereal tonight walking into room 402 of the Grand Mirage Hotel. Even though she told me she was going to bed early because of a terrible migraine, look at her incredible dedication to networking, taking late-night private meetings with Mr. Drake. Truly an angel who transcends traditional relationship boundaries. She is wearing the stunning, newly released Elysian Fall Collection silk gown, $12,000 with matching diamonds. Perfection. #ClaraQueen, #LoyalFan, #Drake and Clara, #relationship goals, #inspirational. System check. User has praised the female lead using comprehensive visual data. High-level engagement detected. Compliance rate, 100%. User life force status, optimal. A warm, soothing wave of energy washed over Jin. The system was practically purring, completely blind to the absolute chaos it was about to unleash. Because of the system's algorithmic buff, the post didn't just sit on a minor feed. I passed every filter on the internet, shooting straight to the top of everyone's timeline globally. Within 2 hours, the post hit 5 million views. To the system, it was a 10/10 simp post praising her outfit. To the entire internet, it was a high-definition receipt of blatant infidelity and a public relations disaster. The true genius of Jin's strategy, however, hit the next morning. Because Jin had meticulously tagged the luxury fashion house Elysian to prove how much he admired Clara's taste, the brand woke up to a branding nightmare. The comment section under his viral post was a war zone, with millions of people joking that Elysian was now the official uniform for cheating on your fiancé. By noon, a courier arrived at Clara's doorstep with a formal legal document, a cease and desist letter from Elysian Haute Couture's legal team. The letter explicitly ordered Clara to stop wearing, tagging, or associating their luxury garments with her extracurricular public scandals, citing severe brand defamation. Within 48 hours, terrified of being dragged into the viral drama of @Clar_is_loyal_SIMP, 3 other major fashion houses blacklisted her. Clara went from a high society trendsetter to a fashion pariah overnight. If she wanted to go to an event, she would have to buy generic, off-their-rack clothes, instantly destroying her elite socialite image. Jin sat back in his apartment, watching the follower count on LAS_loyal_SIMP explode into the millions. The leads were trapped. Clara couldn't sue him for defamation because he hadn't said a single negative word. He had only spoken absolute facts and showered her with compliments that the world's own universe engine had photographed for him. She couldn't even delete the account because the system was actively hot-wiring the internet servers to keep her ultimate simp online. Jin refreshed the page, a malicious grin spreading across his face. He hadn't just bypassed the punishment, he had turned the entire world into an audience, and he was making the system do all his stalking for him. By the following week, the narrative was violently struggling to correct itself. Clara's loyal simp was officially a global phenomenon, and the system was desperate to restore the traditional webcomic balance. If Jin wasn't going to suffer emotional damage, the universe would force him to suffer physical damage. According to the unedited script of Chapter 28, a major hero saves the beauty event was scheduled. Clara was supposed to walk across a busy intersection, distracted by her thoughts of Drake, when a runaway luxury sports car would careen toward her. Jin was hard-coded to dive into the street, take the full impact of the vehicle, and end up comatose while Clara wept over his broken body, realizing his tragic devotion. Jin could feel the narrative gravity pulling him toward the intersection. The system interface flickered in his vision. Warning: major compulsory narrative event detected. User Jin Avery must undergo physical sacrifice for the female lead. Fail rate will result in instant life force termination. Jin smiled coldly. Oh, I'll sacrifice myself. But if I'm going to protect her, I need to make absolutely sure I survive to love her another day, right? System: optimize my gear for maximum protection of the goddess's future. Logic logged. Valid premise. Safety upgrade permitted. Instead of wearing the casual sweater vest the original artist had drawn him in, Jin used his newfound influencer and revenue to buy an absurd, custom-engineered explosive ordnance disposal suit. It was a literal 200-pound tank of reinforced steel plating, internal shock absorbers, and thick Kevlar padding, usually reserved for bomb squads. Clara stepped off the curb, her face pale and devoid of luxury makeup since her fashion blacklisting. Right on cue, a modified sports car lost control, tires screeching as it veered directly toward her. Clara froze, screaming, paralyzed by the classic heroine trope. From the sidewalk, Jin launched himself. He didn't just push her. Wielding 200 pounds of momentum and heavy steel padding, Jin hit Clara like a runaway freight train. Crash! The car slammed into Jin's armored back. The shock absorbers in the bomb suit hissed, safely dispersing the kinetic energy and leaving Jin completely, utterly unblemished. Clara, however, bore the brunt of Jin's selfless rescue. The steel chest plate pinned her to the asphalt, and the sheer weight of the armor pulverized her ribs, knocking the wind entirely out of her. She skittered across the pavement beneath him, getting a massive, violent face full of gravel and dirt. System check. User threw themselves in front of a vehicle for the female lead selfless protection trait. Keyword: active. Compliance rate: 100%. Jin rolled off her effortlessly, standing up in his pristine, indestructible armor. Clara lay in the dirt, her expensive hair extensions ruined, her face covered in scrapes, wheezing in agony. "Oh my goddess!" Jin yelled through the suit's internal megaphone, making her ears bleed. "Look at how the universe tries to harm you! Do not worry, your loyal simp is completely unharmed and ready to serve." 2 days later, Clara was recovering in a VIP hospital suite, her body wrapped in bandages and her face swollen. She was furious, humiliated, and utterly desperate to reassert her power over him. She called Jin, her voice trembling with rage. "Jin, you psycho!" she hissed into the phone. "You did that on purpose. You broke my ribs. I want an apology. Right now. Drive to the organic market on the other side of town and bring me a Waldorf salad. If it's not here in 30 minutes, we are through." Jin didn't blink. "Anything for you, my queen." He went to the cafeteria, bought a generic salad, and walked over to the hospital pharmacy. He knew from his deep meta-knowledge of the unfinished light novel notes that Clara had a severe, life-threatening allergy to peanuts. It was a plot point the author had intended to use later for Drake to save her. Jin opened a packet of pure peanut powder and generously dumped it into the dressing, mixing it thoroughly. He walked into her hospital room with a bright, vacant smile and handed it to her. "For your health, my goddess, I added a special high-protein organic supplement to ensure your bones heal faster." Clara, eager to dismiss him, snatched the salad and took a massive, aggressive bite to show her authority. Within 30 seconds, her throat began to close. Her face turned a violent shade of purple, and she began frantically clawing at her neck, gasping for air. Luckily for her, she was already surrounded by heart monitors and emergency buttons. Jin calmly stood by and pressed the call light as a swarm of doctors rushed in with EpiPens, slamming them into her thigh to save her life. Once the chaos settled and Clara was hooked up to an oxygen mask, she stared at Jin with pure, unadulterated terror. You tried to kill me!" she croaked through the mask, her chest heaving. "I'm calling the police! I'm telling them you poisoned me! You're going to jail!" Jin didn't flinch. In fact, his smile grew wider, his eyes completely dark and unfazed. He leaned over her bed, his voice dripping with a terrifying, robotic serenity. "Yes, Clara, call them! That is absolutely the right thing to do," Jin whispered, his tone disturbingly polite. "A goddess like you should never be harmed in any way. The police must investigate every threat to your safety. I will gladly sit in the cell and write poetry about your justice. Should I dial 911 for you right now? Let's make it a live stream for the account." Clara stared at him, the sheer, unhinged compliance in his eyes, the way he smiled while actively endorsing his own arrest, all wrapped in the guise of devotion, chilled her to the absolute bone. He wasn't a simp anymore. He was a smiling monster using her own existence to torture her. "Get out!" she whimpered, pulling the sheets up to her face. "Get away from me!" "As you wish, my queen." Jin bowed elegantly. From that day forward, Clara never texted him for an errand again. She was too terrified that his next act of devotion would actually finish her off. For 3 glorious weeks, Jin enjoyed absolute peace. Clara hadn't sent a single text, too traumatized by the high-protein salad to risk using him as an errand boy. But the webcomic's invisible narrative strings couldn't be ignored forever. The story was hurtling toward Chapter 40, the grand high society banquet hand the system wasn't about to let the designated simp skip it. Jin woke up to a screen flashing a violent neon crimson in his vision. Compulsory narrative event, the Chrysanthemum Gala. Scenario: user must attend and publicly declare admiration for the female lead to provoke male lead's jealousy. Penalty for non-attendance: immediate cardiovascular collapse. Time remaining: 2 hours. Jin sighed, tossing his duvet aside. Fine. I'm going. But if I'm going to declare my admiration, it needs to reach the widest audience possible. System, link my optical feed directly to @Clara's loyal simp and start a global live stream. Logic logged. Amplifying devotion via live stream is valid. Broadcast engaged. Algorithmic boost. Maximized. The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom cast a blinding glow over the city's elite. Because of Jin's weaponized social media account, Clara had been blacklisted by every major fashion house. Tonight, she had desperately cobbled together a generic green boutique dress, trying to maintain her dignified Shanks's image next to Drake, who stood tall and brooding in a bespoke tuxedo. Clara was carefully holding a glass of champagne, trying to laugh elegantly at a wealthy investor's joke, when Jin smoothly glided into the inner circle. He didn't look pathetic at all, dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit funded entirely by his influencer ad revenue. He looked completely radiant. He held his phone out openly, the front-facing camera capturing his serene, smiling face alongside Clara and Drake. The red live icon flashed in the corner of his screen, the viewer count aggressively ticking upward by the hundreds of thousands every second. "Oh, look at my goddess," Jin announced, his voice carrying flawlessly across the high-ceilinged room and directly into the phone's high-fidelity microphone. Clara's spine froze. She turned slowly, her knuckles turning white around her glass. Jin clasped his free hand over his heart, staring at Clara with eyes that looked like they were brimming with tears of pure devotion. "Look at how our queen bravely wears a dress that clearly went out of style last season." Jin beamed, ensuring his phone camera caught every angle of her outfit. Her complete indifference to the judgmental whispers of the upper class is truly inspiring. Most women would hide in shame, but Clara? She wears cheap polyester with the pride of a queen who doesn't care that she looks like a repurposed curtain. The wealthy investor blinked in stunned silence. A nearby duchess choked on her caviar. On Jin's screen, the live chat exploded in a violent frenzy. "Curtain dress. Clara got roasted. This is social murder." "Our Jin is so funny." System check. Keywords goddess, inspiring, queen, and pride detected. User has declared admiration. Compliance rate, 100%. System status, satisfied. A soothing wave of life force surged through Jin's veins. The keywords cleared the filter flawlessly. Clara's face flashed through 3 distinct shades of mortification before settling on a horrified, tearful crimson. "Jin, stop talking," she whispered through a forced, trembling smile, frantically covering her mouth as she realized millions of people were watching her get dismantled in real time. But Jin wasn't done. He adjusted the camera angle to frame Clara and the brooding Drake perfectly together. "No, Clara, the world must witness your humility. Look, we already have 5.2 million viewers adoring you right now." Jin cried out, sounding deeply moved. Notice how her makeup is applied thick enough to entirely conceal the aggressive stress breakouts from her recent public scandals. The structural engineering of that foundation is a miracle of modern science. It shows her incredible resilience. Even when the whole world thinks she's a social climber, she still has the courage to show her face. "Hey, shut your mouth," Drake finally snapped, stepping forward to trigger the jealous male-led trope. He glared down at Jin, veins bulging on his forehead. "Who gave you permission to insult Clara on a live broadcast?" Jin gasped, looking utterly heartbroken and offended on Clara's behalf, keeping the phone tracking Drake's furious expression. "Insult her, Mr. Drake! How dare you misinterpret my pure love?" Jin bellowed. "I am praising her. Look at her body." Most women would look bloated after surviving a severe, near-fatal peanut allergy incident caused by an overdose of organic protein, but Clara's swelling has gone down beautifully. Her skin only looks slightly gray tonight. "She is a warrior." A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the physical ballroom, perfectly mirrored by the chaotic, laughing live chat scroll on his screen. "Drake looks pieced. Jin is savage. The image of the pristine, untouchable, elegant Clara was being systematically demolished. Word by adoring word in front of the high society crowd and a global audience of millions. Drake opened his mouth to threaten Jin with financial ruin, but Jin smoothly cut him off, turning a beaming smile directly toward the male lead. And you, Mr. Drake, your loyalty to a blacklisted woman is so touching. Investors are saying your company's stock plummeted 10% this week because of your association with her public drama. But look at you still standing next to her, completely ignoring your fiduciary duties to your shareholders. Truly a masterclass in financial self-destruction for the sake of a poorly dressed woman. Drake's face went completely pale. The wealthy investors who had been chatting with him moments before suddenly stepped back, exchanging panicked glances about Drake's competency. Clara looked like she wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow her whole. She dropped her champagne glass, burst into tears of pure, unadulterated humiliation, and fled toward the restrooms. Drake, looking thoroughly compromised and professionally ruined, glared at the camera lens one last time before rushing after her to save his collapsing public image. Jin casually picked a glass of expensive champagne from a passing waiter's tray. He turned the camera back to his own face, raised his glass to the millions of viewers cheering in the live chat, and smiled elegantly. Remember to like and subscribe, everyone. Anything for the Queen. Following the disaster at the Chrysanthemum Gala, the narrative arc of the Radiant Path of Love was in shambles. Drake and Clara were suffering from a severe case of main character syndrome. They genuinely believed that universe would always bend to their will, treating secondary characters like mindless tools to elevate their own romance. But Jin held a weapon they couldn't possibly comprehend. He knew how the story was supposed to end before the author abandoned it. Specifically, he knew the unresolved plot hooks of Chapter 45. Jin's phone screen flickered to life in his dark apartment. Narrative progression requirement. Chapter 45. Scenario. The female lead demands unfettered access to her hereditary trust fund to back the male lead's transformative tech conglomerate investment. User duty. Act as the controlling, jealous antagonist. Refuse to release the funds, insisting the startup is a fraud, provoking the female lead to hate you and the male lead to vow to crush you. In the original unreleased notes of the Shiatu's script, Jin Javery was meant to be the tragic voice of reason. Clara's grandfather had deeply trusted the original Jin, appointing him as the sole executor and gatekeeper of her massive trust fund precisely because he was pragmatic and protective. In the author's draft, the original Jin was supposed to desperately withhold the money, trying to save Clara because his meta-intuition flagged the green energy startup as a fraudulent shell company. He was meant to suffer their collective wrath just to protect her assets. Jin let out a low, melodic laugh. Deny her the money? Be the bad guy who saves her fortune? Why would I do that? I'm Clara's ultimate loyal simp. If my queen wants to hand her entire life savings over to her brooding alpha prince, who am I to stand in the way of true love? Jin logged directly into the financial terminal. When Clara sent her demanding, entitled email expecting a massive legal battle to release the capital, Jin didn't block it. Instead, he fast-tracked the paperwork, signing off on a maximum leverage transfer of the entirety of Clara's family trust with an official note, "For the happiness and absolute fulfillment of my goddess." To the system, this absolute capitulation was an act of unmatched, tragic selflessness. System check. User Jin Avery has surrendered his only narrative leverage to support the female lead's wishes. Compliance rate, 100%. The moment the market opened and the transfer went through, Jin launched a live stream on it. Clara's loyal simp. My beautiful followers. Jin spoke into the camera, a serene, glassy-eyed smile plastered across his face. Today, I have proved my absolute, undying devotion to Clara. Her grandfather trusted me to protect her wealth, but I believe true love means having blind faith in her judgment. I have happily released her entire generational trust so she can invest every single cent into Mr. Drake's green energy project. Let's celebrate her unwavering support for her prince. Within 3 hours, the startup was exposed as a massive multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. Because Jin had amplified the entire transaction to his millions of global viewers, public scrutiny was immediate. Drake's corporate assets were frozen by noon. Because Clara had willfully overridden her grandfather's cautious framework to dump her capital into a fraudulent scheme. Her family trust was completely wiped out, leaving her family entirely bankrupt and legally tangled in the asset liquidation. Drake lost everything, and Clara was dragged down to the exact same rock-bottom poverty line. By forcing their financial destinies together through his supportive compliance, Jin had effectively trapped both leads in a suffocating, inescapable financial crisis where they were legally liable for each other's ruined credit. But the true psychological torture came with the jealousy antidote. Drake's entire identity as a brooding alpha male relied on having a romantic rival to crush. He thrived on the jealousy, waiting for Jin to confront him about taking Clara's money so he could look superior in front of her. Jin completely denied him the satisfaction. He stopped interacting with Clara entirely. He blocked her number. He didn't look at her in public. Instead, Jin directed all of his mandated simp behavior through third-party proxies. Whenever the script demanded Jin show up to pine after Clara, he instead sent a hired professional 20-piece marching band to follow her around town. When she went to a cheap coffee shop, the only place she could afford now, the marching band would suddenly burst out of the alleyway, playing tragic, sorrowful jazz ballads, while a hired actor with a megaphone screamed, "Jin Avery's soul weeps for you from a distance, Clara. Please enjoy this reasonably priced pastry." Drake would show up to the scene, chest puffed out, fists clenched, looking for a fight. He would scan the crowd, screaming, "Where is he? Avery, face me like a man." But Jin was never there. He was at home, watching the chaos unfold through the system's automated satellite feed, sipping tea. Drake was left posturing, yelling, and trying to fight a rival who literally did not exist in the physical space. To the public eye and the millions of people watching the viral clips online, the disgraced, bankrupt billionaire looked entirely unhinged. He was fighting air, screaming at a brass section, and slowly losing his mind while Clara wept in the background, covered in the marching band's neon confetti. The leads were thoroughly ruined, their grand main character personas completely broken, and Jin hadn't broken a single rule of the world to do it. With the narrative completely bled dry of its drama, the system was nearing a total breakdown. The webcomic was running out of chapters, and the system's core programming was screaming for a resolution. It needed to fulfill the ultimate, unalterable tag assigned to the radiant path of love before its hiatus: happy ending, the grand wedding. But there was a massive problem. Drake and Clara now hated each other's guts. With their finances completely obliterated by the collapsed Ponzi scheme, the illusion of their fated romance vanished. Clara blamed Drake for being a fraudulent failure. Drake blamed Clara for dragging her family's legal liabilities into his corporate sphere. They were actively trying to flee to separate corners of the country to escape the wreckage. The system began to glitch violently in Jin's vision, emitting a high-pitched warning hum. Narrative crises detected. Main characters are refusing compulsory marriage. Finale stagnation imminent. User penalty active. Life force drain commencing in 30 minutes unless the grand wedding tag is engaged. Jin adjusted his collar in front of the mirror, entirely unfazed. Relax, system. Main characters always think they are above the consequences of their actions. They just need a little external motivation to realize they belong together. Check the data filters. because my next act of ultimate devotion is about to force their hands. To lock the leads into an unbreakable cage, Jin executed a two-pronged strategy targeting the only things Drake and Clara still cared about: corporate survival and family honor. First, Jin approached the remaining panicked board members of Drake's conglomerate. Using his massive at Clara's loyal simp streaming revenue and newly acquired market influence, Jin secretly bought up a minority voting bloc. He didn't use it to oust Drake. Instead, he presented the board with a meticulously crafted public relations ultimatum. Drake's image is currently associated with high-level financial fraud, Jin told the board during a private, secure call. But if he marries Clara, the woman whose family trust was tragically wiped out in the same venture, the media can spin it as a bittersweet story of romantic solidarity. It turns a cynical white-collar crime into a Shakespearean tragedy of star-crossed lovers. If Drake refuses to marry her, it proves he deliberately targeted her family. The stocks will hit zero, and the board goes down with him. Terrified of total financial ruin, the board issued Drake a private, ironclad directive: marry Clara immediately to stabilize the corporate narrative, or face an immediate boardroom coup, asset stripping, and a referral to the federal prosecutors. Second, Jin took care of Clara. He anonymously leaked a highly classified, heavily encrypted ledger from Drake's frozen servers directly to Clara's surviving, deeply traditional extended family. The leak explicitly detailed that Clara had willfully signed over her grandfather's hereditary trust fund, not for a legitimate business expansion, but during a late-night, unmonitored meeting in room 402 of the Grand Mirage Hotel. The implication of high society and adultery, combined with the catastrophic loss of the family fortune, sent Clara's family into a frenzy of aristocratic panic. Her parents, terrified of being completely cast out of the upper echelon and facing endless social mockery, gave Clara a brutal choice: marry Drake publicly to legitimize the hotel scandal and co-sign his corporate restructuring, or be formally disowned, stripped of the family name, and left to face the incoming bankruptcy lawsuits entirely alone. Both leads were trapped. The board was holding a knife to Drake's throat. Her family was holding a knife to Clara's. They had no choice but to sprint toward the altar just to survive. The finale arrived. Because the system required Jin to give them a grand wedding, Jin used his influencer fortune to set up the most extravagant ceremony in the capital, structuring the entire event as a massive, commercialized reality TV special. However, the massive, multi-million-dollar streaming and advertising revenue generated from @Clara's loyal simp was never actually spent on the wedding. Instead, Jin merely used his massive financial clout to co-sign the vendor and broadcasting contracts directly in Drake and Clara's names. By legally structuring the entire extravaganza as a high-stakes, commercialized reality TV special tied to their personal liabilities, he ensured that every single astronomical expense, from the televised broadcasting rights down to the last piece of neon confetti, was billed directly to the ruined leads. While the system and the system's programming registered his massive energy expenditure, coordination, and legal backing as the ultimate act of financial devotion required to fulfill the grand wedding tag, Jin's actual cash reserves remained completely untouched. On the day of the ceremony, millions of viewers tuned into the live stream. The cathedral doors swung open. Drake stood at the altar, looking haggard, pale, and deeply stressed in a rented tuxedo. Clara marched down the aisle in an overly flamboyant, heavily laced gown that she was contractually obligated to wear for the broadcast sponsors. There was absolutely no love left between them. The grueling corporate blackmail and family ultimatums had turned them into bitter, resentful enemies. But the system's invisible force, perfectly aligned with Jin's external traps, spelled their bodies to stand hand in hand at the altar, forcing them to smile for the flashing cameras. Jin stood right at the front, a tissue held to his eye, weeping tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "Look at them!" Jin cried out into his microphone, his voice broadcasting to over 20 million live viewers. True love conquers all. Their families wanted it, the corporate board demanded it, and their own past choices forced it. They are stuck together forever. Isn't it beautiful? The priest, reading from a script Jin had subtly adjusted, boomed, "Do you, Drake, take Clara to be your legally bound partner in compounding debt, corporate liability, and lifelong mutual resentment, until death do you part?" Drake's jaw twitched. He looked at the cameras, then at the terrifyingly serene face of Jin. Under the absolute compulsion of the system and the threat of federal prison, his mouth forced out the words, "I do." "And do you, Clara, take Drake?" Clara choked back a sob of pure rage, staring at Drake like she wanted to murder him to escape her family's wrath. "I do." Success! Tag fulfilled. Happy ending wedding completed. World script closing. Initiating dismissal of transdimensional entity Jin Avery. The edges of the cathedral began to blur. The golden digital ink of the webcomic started to dissolve into white light. The air grew light, and Jin could feel his consciousness finally breaking free from the suffocating rules of the narrative. As his body began to pixelate and fade away into reality, the final permanent closing panel of the webcomic locked into place. There was no romantic kiss. In the center of the final page, the male and female leads stood at the altar, completely ruined, aggressively bickering, and swearing at each other in front of the horrified priest. In Drake's trembling hands was a massive, multi-million-dollar itemized bill for the television broadcast Flowers, and neon confetti a debt they would spend the rest of their miserable, contractually bound lives paying off together while trying to appease their board and families. And right in the bottom corner of the panel, fading into a peaceful, wealthy white light, Jin Avery gave a final wave to the camera, leaving behind a legacy of absolute, malicious compliance. The webcomic was finished. Jin slipped back into reality with his entire viral media fortune fully intact, leaving the miserable newlyweds to hold the bill while he went home rich. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe to help support the channel and to get more stories like this in the future. Bye!